then that's supposed to occur in half an hour. So if we can get through the next few papers in an efficient manner, then hopefully that still leaves time to have that discussion. So
I was just going to say, I promise to behave because I've got to head off at about 2 to do school pickup. So
no worries, Glenn. And His Worship the Mayor has had to pop out as well. So we're going to get cracking. Sorry, Mark, over to you and Joe as we talk to the report at 8.2, page 70.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, good afternoon, everybody. So we've obviously got to talk to the paper today. We've got Joe and Ian, and we've also got Josh from Research First. So in terms of the plan of attack, Joe will just give a very quick overview of our non-financial performance for the third quarter of the financial year. We'll then go straight to Ian. Ian will give you a very quick overview. We'll take the report as read, but I think it's just worthy of highlighting some key performance metrics. So you'll hear a little bit from Joe, you'll hear a little bit from Ian. We'll then cross over to Josh to take some questions on the resident satisfaction survey, and then we did provide the chair with just basically a contents page, as I suspect that many of you will want to sort of maybe do some or have some questions regarding our clusters and our activities. So we'll, like the last time, we'll start with infrastructure. There will be page ranges. We do have most GMs in the room, so if there are sort of specific questions at the activity level or the performance measure, we'll take those in an orderly fashion. So handing over to Joe.
Thank you, Mark, and through you, Mr. Chair. So, quarter 3 report for the period January to the end of March. I just wanted to first of all let you know that we have a correction to make in the minutes, please, to be noted on pages 68, on the agenda, page 140 and 141. That's the Residents' Opinion Survey, Service Delivery, Circular Charts. The colours, percentages and targets are all correct. It's just the shading on some of those charts hasn't matched the percentages. So just wanted that noted, please. So moving into an overview of the report. Overall, we're doing pretty well for quarter 3. We have, as you can see, 80% of projects on track, 71% of our resident satisfaction 71% of our residents are satisfied overall, and comparing that nationally, over the last 3 quarters, we've exceeded the national results in overall satisfaction. In terms of our performance measures, we have 47% on target at this point, and 33% are annual measures. So at this sort of time of the year, just sort of looking forward to the end of the year and the annual report, gauging where we're at present, assuming we did achieve those annual measures, it would bring us into a similar bracket to what we have over the last 3 years, whereby we've achieved performance measures in the range of 76% to 83%. So, but we're yet to see those results come through, obviously, in the annual report. In terms of performance measures achievement, parks and open spaces and our 3 waters measures, we've been doing really well in those areas. Some jump out highlights for the quarter. We had obviously Transmission Gully opening up. We had our growth strategy adopted, the workforce plan, the coastal hazards, Jacob's report, and consulted on the Waikanae Awa River, and we also established the Tourism Advisory Board, and we had representation for we participated in hearings for the representation review. So it's quite a busy quarter overall. There's a lot of detail in the report that I'll leave you to comment on. But in terms of the residents' opinion survey, we, as I mentioned earlier, did better than the national comparison. That was for overall satisfaction and value for money. So we're starting now to reverse that trend for value for money, so we're on a positive track there. A little more work to do compared to nationally around opportunities to have a say and information on decisions that affect my area. We also included some information on verbatim comments and feedback and themes around some of the question areas, and we've included where we've got programs in place across council to address some of those themes. Yes, and I guess also looking at our outcomes and perception of our outcomes, we're doing really well across all our outcomes. Obviously, the mana whenua one will be assessed at year end, but the housing one, we went up 1%. But I know we've got a great program of work in that area, so we should hopefully see some traction in there over time. So did you want to comment further? I'll now hand over to Ian on the finances. Thank you.
Welcome, Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Through you, Mr. Chair. So just a quick financial overview, and I'm speaking to page 127 of the agenda, where the financial section starts. So for the 9-month period, we had revenues of 78.2 million, expenses of 70 million, and a net surplus of 8.2 million. So I'll speak first about revenues. Within that number of 78.2, the rates-related revenues, which is rates and user charges, basically are very close to budget at around 70 million. But we also had capital subsidies of 5.3 and development contributions of 2.9 million. So that's 8.2 million of capital-related receipts. And just to explain what happens there, that is cash receipts coming in which contribute towards funding for capital projects. So whilst it is cash and it's recognised as revenue, which is why you see it in the figures, it's not available to meet rating expenses. It basically flows through to a cash surplus, which is then available to offset the capital cost of the projects. But that 8.2 million of capital receipts is the reason why we're reflecting an accounting surplus at the bottom line of basically that figure. If we look ahead to, still talking about revenue to year end, I'm expecting a similar sort of picture. Rates-related revenues, we expect to be very close to budget. Development contributions slightly ahead. Capital subsidies we expect to be around 6.8 million. And that, I just note, is going to be about 4.9 million under budget. So there has been, because of the delays in the underlying capital projects, the capital receipts that we were expecting to receive won't come through as quickly as we'd expected and won't be received this year. And primarily I'm talking about the Link Road, Te Urahi and Mahara Gallery. But that is timing in nature, and we'd expect those to come through in due course as those projects progress. The other items to note in revenue, we included in budgets this year the assumption that the State Highway 1 vested assets would come across this year at a value of around 35 million, and so that's included in the full year revenue budget. We know that's not going to occur, so that will occur next year. Will show us a variance against budget this year, but again, capital related, purely timing in nature, so it doesn't affect the rated position. Moving down to expenses, year to date we're 1.2 million under budget, forecasting to be 3.5 over for the full year. I think you've heard me say it before, I still think there's a level of conservatism included in those forecasts, i.e. I think the outturn will be closer to budget than that figure. But there's no question we have got pressures, electricity, for example, plus professional costs around a number of our strategic initiatives. So we certainly do have some pressures, but I would expect us to be closer to budget than that forecast indicates. On the CapEx side of things, year to date, 29.4 million. Forecasting in this report 50 million for the full year, and that compares against a budget of 73. And I'll just note that since publishing these figures, end of March, we've since revised the CapEx forecast further, and we believe it's more likely to be around 43.5. So as you've heard, a number of times, it's a difficult delivery environment for capital, and we're going to be well under the budget for this year. And again, primary projects that make up the variance, the Link Road, the Waikanai treatment plant, Te Urahi and Mahara. And I'll just finish off on net debt. At the end of March, we were 167.9 million, which is 175% of operating income, and that compares with our LTP limit of 280%. So that goes hand in hand with CapEx. Really, as CapEx is lower, so our debt will end the year lower than we projected in the LTP. And those are probably the key points I wanted to make.
Thank you. And I just want to check with Mark and the team whether we want to pause there for any questions or go into the activity clusters and then take questions through there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, look, we do have Josh from Research First online, and he's literally here just to answer any questions. So a suggestion would be to potentially ask the floor if there's any questions related to the resident opinion survey. Once we've done that, then we'll go straight into the activities and take questions as they come.
Okay. Do we have a little bit of an intro from Josh in terms of the findings, or are we straight into questions?
Straight into questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Hope we're not moving too fast for elected members. Are there any questions specifically, given that we've got an external waiting online around the residents' opinion survey, both in the chambers or online? Just pop your hand up if it's online. While I'm just waiting for people to gather their train of thought, just want to thank the staff for including the national trends, which was a wish from the table, and Councillor Compton and others around having that information being available. So. Yep, and the changes to the targets and so forth. So just remembering that those charts are right in terms of the numbers. It's just a little bit of a slight error with the actual shading and how that's worked out, formatting and so forth. So look, I can't see any up there for Josh, so I'm not going to labour on that one. Maybe we'll just move into the activity reports and we can touch on the different aspects. So I had one there. Actually, I'll ask that now, just in case Ian doesn't come back in. Ian, in the break, I had mentioned to you, there's been a lot of chatter, particularly from one individual, but others around council surplus and using that to reduce the coming year's rate increase. And so I think the figure of 8.4, 8.6% has been bandied around. Do you want to talk around how that isn't the actuality in terms of that posted surplus and how that can or can't be used and so forth? And just, I know you spoke to it a little bit, but that can't be used, and where it came from and how it can and can't be used.
Yeah, so I'll just really reiterate what I said earlier around the capital receipts. So it's capital contributions towards projects. So it tends to come from places like Waka Kotahi, or where we've had contributions coming in from third parties towards projects like Mahara. Three Water Stimulus was also a source of funding this financial year. So that's money that's granted to us to contribute towards capital projects. From an accounting point of view, it comes in and the credit shows as revenue, which is what you see in our figures, but we can't spend that on operating expenses. Basically, it flows through into surplus and therefore cash, which is then available to offset the capital costs of those projects. So it's not available to meet rateable expenses, if you like.
Thank you. And again, to be doubly clear, it's not, the surplus isn't a result of us over rating our residents and receiving more income than what we require to fund our operational expenses, which I think is probably what the suggestion is by some of those residents. Did you want to add something to that, Mark?
Well, I'll just say there is actually, in the report, there's a reconciliation.
I think if I recall, there was about a 0.3 projected shortfall.
Page 60 of the report, there's a reconciliation that basically takes you from that $8 million surplus figure and adjusts for those capital items and various other things that aren't available to get you down to the true rated position at the bottom line, which is currently, well, based on the expense forecast, we're currently expecting to be in a deficit position.
And I think that was around 300,000 from memory.
Yeah, well, 3 million. 3 million is the forecast out to.
Oh, sorry.
So
I knew it was a 3. Mark, do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Just to add to what Ian said. So there's really two fundamental concepts. There's the net operating surplus or deficit, which is what Ian's been talking to. That it's the just over $8 million is the net operating surplus, which is revenue less expenses, and it's been explained why we've got that. It's just a temporary timing difference in CapEx grants. And then we do what we call a rates-funded surplus or deficit, which is specifically the question, can we use that to offset next year's rates? So going back 6 years, sometimes, so rates-funded surplus or deficit is essentially where rates revenue has exceeded rates-funded expenditure. So if you're positive, it's a surplus, and in the past what we've done is we've used that as a mechanism to reduce rates. Now, you can't, in terms of when you start to look at your annual plan for next year, we haven't finished the financial year, so you can't sort of reduce next year's rates by a forecast, a rates funded surplus. And as Ian has shown, that we're actually forecasting a rates funded deficit. So it's normally 1 year out for a start, because you have to finish the financial year, you have to confirm all your unders and overs, you have to get it audited so that to know for certain what your rates funded position actually is. And typically it's an historic measure, which if there is a surplus, then absolutely it basically means that ratepayers have got a little surplus, which then should be used to offset rates in the future. But it can't be year on year, it's 1 year out. But at this stage, we are forecasting a deficit.
Thank you, Mark. And just I picked up on the page again, that's 132 of the agenda, year-to-date surplus of 2.6 million. Full forecast is a deficit of 3 million, as Mr. Georgeson has pointed out. So certainly not some additional cash there for us to look to reduce rates. So sorry to labour the point, but it's been out there quite a bit, and I just thought it was important in this committee to clarify that. So look, we'll move on. I don't see any lights up for questions around the finances, and obviously we've covered off. Apologies if I didn't say thanks to Josh for sticking around. Let's just move into the activity reports and over to your team, Mark, to kick it off.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. So, look, I think in terms of what we'd like to do is maybe just go cluster for cluster. So, infrastructure is the cluster, and within infrastructure, you have all your activities, which is your access and transport, coastal management, the three waters, and of course, sustainability and resilience. So, in terms of the report, the pages range from pages number 85 to 102. That's the agenda. So I'm assuming that we're all operating off the agenda, so it's page 85 to 102 to the agenda, and we would just welcome any questions you have for pages 85 to 102.
So this is around infrastructure, page 85 to 102. So what I'm going to do is we'll move on to the next one. If councillors haven't called up and you spot a question out of infrastructure, I will come back on this occasion, but I don't want to keep doing it all the way through the meeting. So the next one, Mark. Yeah, sure. So I don't want to leave any councillors behind. So we're 85 to 102. Otherwise, we're going to move on to access and transport, which is, actually that's included in that. Sorry, I could get it. Yep, I'm just getting used to the new format. The next one will be community services. Sorry. So under infrastructure was the access and transport, coastal management, stormwater management, water management, wastewater management, and sustainability and resilience. Councillor Halliday, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've just got a couple of things that I've highlighted here. Page 86, 14 on the report. The second point with regards to challenges talks to there is potential for delays in town centres, public transport hubs, project spending, waka kohere, finish verification. It says the budget allocated will not be sufficient to complete the full project. Additional budget will be required and or staging of the upgrade will need to happen. Just wanting to know where that extra budget might be projected to be coming from. Yeah, just a little bit more of an understanding of that sort of comment.
So I'll just wait for staff. My understanding, we've got Mr. Mellon in line, will just be a pretty noisy at your end, Sean. But my understanding of that will just be a reallocation of the existing CapEx budget. But
so yeah, that was subject to a paper that came through council recently with regard to the award of that work and the where the funding would come from in terms of rephasing our capital works program. So that comment is probably a little bit out of date in terms of that particular project.
Okay, that's fine. And then just page 103 of the agenda. Sorry, I'm just going to flick to it myself. But it's talking to the concept design of the amenity block and sports pavilion was confirmed in the contract for services for remaining. Oh, sorry, page 103. It's the what we delivered, the middle part.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Councillor, we haven't got to page 103 yet.
Oh, my apologies. What was
85 to 102.
Sorry,
we'll come to that
apologies.
next, Martin.
That's cool. Thank you.
Any further? All right, Councillor Hanford. Oh, sorry, Councillor Holbrook. Sorry, just hold there, Sophie. We'll go to Councillor Holbrook while she's got her light up, and then to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'm just looking at. Sorry, my computer's locked. And now it's moved. It's in the water page, in the graph, where we exceeded per person usage by a litre a day. Yeah, so I was just wondering, are we planning potentially, if that continues, to do some marketing and communications around that? We used to have something like He Taonga Te Wai, I think.
So the question is, are we going to do anything to try and discourage the additional use of water, I take it?
Yes.
Mr. Mellon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Apparently there's some feedback coming through from my mic, so I don't know what that is, but hopefully it's not too painful. There is a consent condition associated with the river recharge that is linked to the litres per person per day target. So we have a water conservation and use report that we do annually, and part of that is actually a program of work which includes education and some other activity in that space to try and keep that number down. So yes, we would be. It's also relatively small in terms of the margin of error associated with some of those totals. 1 litre is not a huge amount, but it is definitely something that we are conscious of and keen to look to keep down.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanford?
Yeah, sorry, it's a pretty generic question, not relevant to any specific page, but I'm just wondering, in terms of the way that this report is fed into. So, for example, when we look at, say, the sustainability and resilience section, and the purpose is written in there, those challenges. So I'm guessing the team works directly alongside those specific teams in drafting what the content is, or I'm just keen to, yeah, sorry, it's not a very specific question.
It's fine, Sophie. We've got a response.
So through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is a council-wide report, so Joe and her team and Ian and the team do actually work with all the activity managers in terms of there is alignment to the same text and explanations in the long-term plan, and when you actually see the annual report, you'll see much of this actually repeated. So this is, in terms of the process, it is written in partnership with our subject matter experts. It goes through a review process with at SLT and with the GM. So, yeah, was there anything specific that you were concerned about, Councillor?
No, that's good context. Thank you.
So just one last one from me, and we'll move on to the next cluster. I appreciate it's an annual measure. It refers to the percentage of footpaths around service standards. So when we do the surveying, which gives us the inputs for the satisfaction, do we have any idea when people respond where they're from in terms of the areas? I guess where I'm going to with that is, if you surveyed 400 people and you got feedback that the level of surface footpaths were poor, it's helpful to know whether that's primarily in Paraparaumu or whether it was right across the district, or is there a way, without changing the questions that we asked, that we could track that? Sean? Everyone's saying Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I recall in previous years we've actually grouped the responses into the relevant area across the district, so I'm pretty sure that's one of the questions. So, I mean, I'd have to take advice from the survey people, but yeah, I'm pretty certain we could look to refine those comments to the relevant ward or area that they're provided from, and see whether there's a trend or a link to any particular area in terms of footpath issues.
Thank you, Sean. And look, I'm not so much thinking for the report for elected members, although if you wanted to include that, that's fine. I'm more thinking in terms of your team around, if we are looking at improving or stepping up the work in particular areas, that feedback helps inform that.
Yeah, that was the sense I got from the question. I guess the other thing that drives that footpath renewal and replacement is actual physical condition of those assets. So so it would be useful to see whether the feedback aligns with the areas where we know where we've done condition assessment works that we do have a lot of renewals to deliver in terms of footpaths.
Thanks, Sean. I agree. I'll leave that with you and your team. So we're going to move on to the next cluster of community services, page 103 to 110. And in that activity is parks and open spaces, recreation and leisure, and community facilities. Councillor Halliday, I see you've got your light up. That's right, you had that question from this area 102.
Time, yeah.
103.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, on page 103, 31 of the report, it talks to Otaruara Park Stage 2, the concept design for amenity building and sports room has been confirmed and the contract for services for a main designing phase issued. Look, I had a look on the council website, and what's on there is quite significant, and I'm assuming that's not what has gone through with it. But at the last quarterly report, I did ask, and through the community board as well, for perhaps an update, since it's in our ward, with regards to what's happening at that space, in that space as well, because I actually have no idea. Is it still possible to flag that would be good to be done?
So I think we go to Mr. Mendoza for that one.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to follow up with that, Councillor Halliday, no problem at all.
Cool, thank you. No, that's great. And it's a similar sort of thing with McLean Park renewal. I just wanted some clarity. It's just actually on the same page, just the next 2 paragraphs on. But availability of skate park design builders to complete by December 2020 is uncertain. Managing community expectations of what can be delivered with an existing budget may be challenging. Just wanted to get a bit of a clarity on that comment as such. Is that talking about budget constraints with regards to general cost, if you like, cost with regards to delivery as such?
Thanks, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Chair. Partially, Councillor. There is a very constrained market for skateboards. In fact, there's one, possibly 2 suppliers of skateboard construction in New Zealand. So we had booked space with that supplier, but like everybody else at the moment in New Zealand, his availability is contingent upon priorities, availability of raw materials from overseas. And of course, that's all, like everything else, like all the capex in the infrastructure area too. It's all kind of subject to market fluctuations at the moment. So we're just trying to really clearly signal here that yep, it's on the books and we're planning for it, but there's a degree of uncertainty that we would like the community to understand.
No, appreciate that. We just got the pop-up on Saturday, so I just wanted to make sure that I had some information on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor McCann.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Given we've got a community centre that's shut, currently probably absorbing some of the storm, that's not really reflected in any of the stats in the way I read it, in terms of public dissatisfaction, which to me, the question then is, are the stats actually covering what we're delivering, or does the fact that we don't have an open community centre not matter? I can't see how both things can be true.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think, Councillor will speak. I don't think it doesn't matter. It really matters. But what I would concede is that it is worth looking at these measures when we get the opportunity at the next LTP to make sure we are measuring the right things and that it is landing and telling the right story. So clearly, that's a piece of intelligence that we'll need to take into consideration when we have those discussions.
Yeah, thank you. Clearly, I do think it matters, but I can't see that it's being captured, the dissatisfaction in the community that it's closed. The question that will be, and it's not for you, is in terms of funding. We're seeing blowouts in terms of capital expenditure, and I'm really worried that we're not going to have enough money put aside for a community centre that really needs to progress as soon as possible. We've seen and we hear a lot of dissatisfaction from the Waikanai community, and I think it's valid because their library is taking a very long time to build. I would really like to make sure that council staff understand that our community centre is absolutely vital, and we've got to make significant progress on this. And I just don't see it being captured, which I think clearly demonstrates that something's missing from this reporting.
I just want to check there because Mr. DeHaas wanted to add something in, whether that's before Mr. Mendoza replies.
I'll go after Mike.
Okay, Mike, did you have anything to respond to Councillor McCann? Apart from, I just make the comment that in terms of the measures are set through the LTP and we don't change them from there. So if there's a change in terms of our delivery, so for example, a community centre being closed, we wouldn't then go and change the measures to try and actively capture that. But I'll hand it over to Mr. Mendoza and then to Mr. DeHaas.
Yeah, the point I was trying to make, when we get the opportunity to look at those measures, which will be in the next LTP, we will make sure that we take that into account. But no, I don't really have anything further to add to respond to Councillor McCann, other than to say your point is well made and is noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. DeHaas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So just in terms of, there was a couple of things that Councillor McCann raised that I'd just like to add to. So in terms of the resident opinion survey, as you know, there has been, in the past, the questions have been added to, as we've travelled through COVID, and we've gone, so in terms of the functionality of the resident opinion survey is actually the source data for some of the performance measures that lie or live within our long-term plan. And there has been great temptation, and it's been done in the past, that we keep adding to that survey, and before you know it, we're ringing up a representative sample of our ratepayers or residents, and we're keeping them on the phone for half an hour because we keep adding all these questions, and we get so far away from our LTP performance measures. So we do have a new long-term plan. We did do substantial work to make sure that, as always, you can always change your performance measures every 3 years, but we made sure that the resident opinion survey, because its intent is to be the source data for some performance measures, that's exactly what it is. So we don't have a question that says, are you dissatisfied that the community centre is closed? But obviously it's something that we need to take account of. And that won't change because we have deliberately brought it back so we can say with clarity how we're performing against the performance measures that lie within the long-term plan. In terms of the capital projects, so it is not the intention of this paper to provide a detailed overview of our CapEx program. That paper will come as part of the annual plan. Lots of work has been done. It's around about this time every year where we start to look at what do we need to carry over, what projects are in train, what projects haven't started, what impact does that have on next year's budget, and that's a big part of the annual plan. So we did certainly take on board the last discussion we had that you do want to have clarity. If it's $84.5 million is the budget for the CapEx next year, what is the full list of the projects? And there you'll see how much money has been assigned to the community centre and so forth and so forth. So that is part of another report that will come to the table, and we will take you through that detail. This report has been redesigned. It used to be, I think, 130 pages long, and lots of the information, lots of the detail was lost because of its size and its scale. So what we are trying to do is provide a high-level overview so that it's a bit more transparent, it's easier to follow, and that you can read this report and understand how the council is performing, both from a financial and non-financial. But the detail that you're asking for is coming.
Further question?
Just respond this with your leave, just to say thank you very much for the answer, and I totally understand the need for not war and peace in terms of questioning, but it is ironic that we can do quite well in this general area, missing such a big chunk of our offerings. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further Questions from councillors? Sorry? Ms McDougall.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Chair. As sponsor of the Community Centre project, I just thought I could maybe make a few comments that address some of Councillor McCann's comments around the level of commitment to the project from the staff. We are absolutely aware that this is a significant matter of interest for our community, and I'm happy to share with councillors some updates that I shared with Councillor McCann yesterday, where we have for a number of months been in conversations with another landowner here in the town centre who has an interest in potentially partnering with us on this project. And that is the reason why conversations have been slow in terms of the public visibility of that. We have staff meeting next week to start work to prepare a briefing for you to give you an update on where those conversations are at, so you can expect to be hearing more from us in the very near future about the project.
Thank you, Janice. I don't see any further questions in this cluster. In my attempt to chair and juggle everything, I've missed a question myself from the infrastructure cluster, and it's just around the Haltree water project. There was a question on the council Facebook page, and again directly to me on the Tohoro page around that particular project, and I think that the thrust of the question was the reasons behind the delay, and is it on track or is it not going to meet target? I think staff will probably reply directly to the resident, I'm assuming on the council Facebook page at some stage, but it'd be helpful to know just what we've got this meeting today around that. I imagine it's the usual issues around supply and contractor availability and so forth, but Sean, did you want to add to that?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So we removed the water notice. I think it was this week, maybe yesterday or Tuesday. But we have completed the first stage of that work, but that was delayed due to resourcing and materials issues. So we have now brought two new boards online, and these were to mitigate the turbidity issues that we're having previously that required the board notice. So that work's been completed. We've removed the board notice. The next stage of that is to look at further filtration work. That was always planned for a later date. So I guess stage one was delayed. Stage two, we're currently working through that at the moment.
I'm nervous to ask you whether stage 2 is going to be on track, because one of you is bad enough, let alone hearing two of you, because there's a repeat on your voice there, Sean. So I might just touch base with Glenn at the end of the meeting, or I think he wants to respond now. Yeah, at the end of the meeting, just given the interest of time. Thanks very much, Sean. It's not that we don't love you, but yeah, that was pretty painful. So I've lost my way now. So we're still on the community services. I don't see any further questions from there. So we are going to move through to partnerships, 111 to 118. Any questions from elected members out of this category? And while you're all scurrying to look at your notes, I'll ask one around to Urahi. There was a comment in there around the retaining wall costs heavily underestimated. I thought the issues with the budget there were that the increased costs in materials and so forth. The way that I read that was when you did your QS or whatever, that the estimates were grossly understated. Could there be some explanation around that?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, was that the retaining wall along the stream? Is that what we're talking about? Certainly the retaining wall along the stream, the costs were greater than we initially expected. There had to be quite an increase in sheet piling, the methodology that we needed to do the work. That is a separate project from Te Irahi itself.
Thank you, Glenn. And just to clarify, I was reading from other progress on page 117 of the agenda, retaining Kapiti Gateway to Urahi, retaining and earthworks along Taikotu Stream, delay due to supply shortages and flood damage. The original budget for the it says training wall, but I think it means retaining wall and stormwater works was heavily underestimated, requiring rephased budget. So hence the reference to. All right, Councillor Halliday.
Look, I just wanted to add to those comments around the entrance to Te Tuku stream. We just had some inquiries to the retaining walls lower on one side than the other, but the answers I got back around that were actually that was a design as such because they're currently submerged, so that wasn't unexpected as such. Just wanted to put it out there for general knowledge.
Have you got a question there for
no
staff
question. I just
response?
wanted to put it out as general knowledge because I'm more than likely people are going to be asking about that as well.
Thank you. And I see Councillor has actually responded online with that specific answer to that point. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through the chair, just following up the first question on Te Uru here and the stream there, and specifically the discussions about online about the debris arresters, is that going to incur additional costs with the remedial work that's taking place here at the moment?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, we're doing some work at the stream mouth at the moment. It's work we do periodically, which involves rechanneling or redirecting the outfall. As part of that process, we're removing some of the debris arresters. There will be some charge to lift those out and to reinstate them, but not substantial cost. The majority of the cost is I suppose I'd term it normal maintenance that we do from time to time. Certainly the coast is maybe even more dynamic at the moment than what it normally is, and we're seeing right along the coast there's large deposits of sand in places, and the stream mouth we're talking about is one of those. So we'll watch, we'll monitor. Hopefully the work we're doing at the moment will be enough, but we'll see if we need to go back and do any more work there.
Councillor Compton, do you have any further?
I do. I just want to bring up the page. So also on page 117, there's the following bullet points about Kapiti Airport, with council staff continue to be involved in discussions about the future of the airport as appropriate. No formal role for council has been confirmed or agreed. Has there been any involvement proposed to the current airport owners or anything like that that's yet to come to the council, that council have been yet to be made aware of?
I'm just looking to see who's going to respond to that. Is that Sean? Thank you, Sean. Brace yourself.
At the risk of sorry, driving a mad with this microphone. No, there hasn't been any direct conversation with the airport or current owners. But we are proposing to the Mayor's for a briefing just on where things are at, because it's been some time since I think we were back talking to council, and there have been a few things that have moved forward. So cover those off with briefing as soon as we can lock in a date.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Halliday.
Sorry, it's just coming back to the Te Tuku entrance again. I was just curious to know, on the northern side of the stream, where the retaining sports done, is matting down there. Is there actually going to be a structured footpath or anything put in that space at all?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Happy to meet with you outside the meeting, councillor, and talk through any detailed plans.
Thank you, Glenn. So a quick look around. Oh, sorry, Councillor Halliday, I know you're out. And look online, no questions. So last call around the communities, around the partnership. Sorry, you 111 and 118. So I don't see any further. So we're going to move on to planning and regulatory services, which is pages 119 through to 123. Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Surprise, surprise, housing and the building thereof. I was wondering, and maybe this is directed at Mr. Jefferson, if that's all right, unless you want to answer for him. I was wondering, there's a little bit of up and down in terms of consents and building, and with the permission of the chair, I was wondering if we could look a little bit forward and tell us what you think that actually means for our district in terms of what's occurring, and then I've got a couple more questions around that.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Look, there has been the last couple of months a little bit of up and down, but last month was back up to about 120 odd consents, building consents for the month. We anticipate actually that will increase, particularly with the changes to NPSUD medium density and the changes in the rules that say you don't need resource consents to do 3x3. We're anticipating come August, there will actually be a bit of a gold rush and lots of building consents. And we had a session yesterday with my lead team to think about how we apply resource if there is less resource consents required to do some of this medium density stuff, how we apply resource into the building team, which will be the first port of call when we get the signal that there will be some potential non-compliance, those sorts of things. So you lose that ability to filter through a resource consent, but certain developers will be wanting to maximise as much of the land as possible, and the first look at that might be a building consent. So we're looking at how we apply resource, making some assumptions there, but that's what we're thinking will happen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of that, because I think the key thing there is capacity, and it sounds as though the intensification rules could create a little bit of an issue where you're trying to rectify things that you would have normally picked up earlier. Is that an ongoing concern?
Look, again, through the chair, it is councillors. And we're doing a bit of a think piece, my principal advisor, on just how we position ourselves best for that. But the encouraging thing is at building consent application time, we should pick those things up. It just means that it shifts the potential fish hooks to a team that are already reasonably busy.
One further question. I've just got one further question. Thank you very much for that answer. You and I have talked about what sits behind what is euphemistically termed an education program, and the potential for councillors to have a briefing around the customer journey. Would you like to very briefly just give us a quick hint of what that's about?
Yeah, again, through the chair, thank you. Look, you may recall that it might be 9 months ago now, we got a consultant in to do some customer journey maps, and you've heard me in previous quarterly reports talk about that. And that was them sitting down with consultants and homeowners and architects and developers and understanding their journey end to end. And I think, as I've said in this chamber previously, there was some confronting feedback for us as a team, and the team have responded to that. But there was also some wonderful insights in terms of how we can improve the end-to-end process for people wanting to build their dream homes and those sorts of things. And a lot of that is born out of right first time is our strategy for the next couple of years within the group, and stopping the rework, poor applications coming through the door, having huge amounts of requests for further information, toing and froing, frustrating for everyone concerned, including staff, and of course the end customer. So the education role is about updating our website, developing fact sheets, FAQs, and making it easier for particularly mums and dads, because it is difficult to navigate your way through the regulatory regime. And on our strategy on a page, we've got a bit of red tape running all the way through that regulatory red tape and compliance, and working closely with consultants to improve the quality of applications. And in fact, the building team have made particularly good ground in that area, where we're seeing the number of RFIs reducing, and equally the number of days to issue the consent reducing as well. So that's, in a nutshell, a little bit around applying the customer journey learnings.
Look, thank you, and I do want to say on behalf of councillors, awesome job in this area when there is so much change, and I'm just sad to see that all the builders out there will be chasing their red cones all around the district. But thank you for your work in this; it's very exciting.
Right, I don't see any further questions within this area, so we're going to move on to corporate, which is 124, pages 124 to 125. And if we've got any questions within this area, now's the time. No, I don't see any. So look, Mark, just help me here. I think we're at the end of the report. We go back to the recommendations. Joe, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to do a last call, not because we've got lots of time, quite the opposite. But if you had a question and amongst the flurry of pages and categories you've missed it, now's the opportunity. But otherwise, we're going to go back to the recommendations found on page, no, not that one, 17. Sorry, yeah, page 70, recommendations A and B. Thank you, Councillor Compton. Moved by Councillor Compton, seconded by Deputy Mayor Holborough. Right of instructions waived. No, any further discussion? Don't see any. Just checking online. Okay, we're going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Just thanking Ian, Mark, Joe and the team. Thank you for taking on the feedback around the survey results and bits and pieces and getting those page numbers on the report when you can. I appreciate the team has said they've just been flat out. Would be extremely helpful for us to navigate through a little bit easier. So look, thanks team. Thanks Joe.
Thank you.
And we're going to move on to the next part. Yeah, sure. All right, we're now going to move on to item number 8.4, which is the overview of the social investment funded projects. And welcome Claire, Janice, and a newcomer to council with Emma. Over to you guys, to you ladies.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. As Councillor Coots has just mentioned, some of you may recognise the lady to my left, Emma Haxton. Previously a staff member here at Council who is currently working on contract for us on a few matters, including the topic that we are here to talk to you about today, and also acknowledging Claire Iwi down the back of the room, who is deeply involved in our social investment program, leading out within the sector the current round of social investment funding that is underway. But I've heard a lot of talk of looking back to look forward in earlier parts of the meeting today, and that's essentially in part what we are here to do today with you. Whilst as part of preparing to bring to you the first of the work around the upcoming round of social investment funding, we thought that the time was right to look back over the initial 3-year period of social investment funding to paint a picture of what was achieved by the 8 projects that were funded as part of that program. And you have a paper in front of you, and there isn't really terribly much that we would like to bring to your attention within that paper. We would actually like the people that have been a part of this program to do the talking on that front, and as such there is a video for you to watch. Now, that is in lieu of having all of the contract holders come here into the chamber. You may remember in previous years on an annual basis there's been over the course of 2 or 3 meetings, some fairly long report backs. Lovely, but long. So although the idea of sitting down to watch a video of around 20 minutes might seem a bit of a struggle for you, hopefully it is better than 2.5 hours worth of report backs, which is what would have happened otherwise. So with that,
so right,
excellent.
Team.
The computer's gone to sleep. So
just grab a coffee or a drink if you want to, just while they restart the computer.
We could also take any questions on the report if anybody
idea.
had any while the computer's restarting.
And so equally, if you have any questions regarding the report while they restart the computer, so just view online as well. To be aware of that. I don't see anyone putting their hand up. Councillor McCann.
Sorry, as I was saying offline, it's pretty big wads of paper we're working through to find our places. I was just interested, while we're rebooting, so to speak, if you could take us through whether the Connected Communities, Safe Communities, Capability sector, those phrases, whether you were surprised at the direction where requests for funding came from and what was missing in your point of view.
In terms of the first round from 3 years ago, I'm going to throw to Emma or Claire to answer that question because I actually wasn't involved at that stage. Over to one of you.
I think that there were a range of different expressions of interest at the beginning. In terms of the proposals, I think that there were some that had been developed over time, so there was no surprises there because they had come and discussed it earlier before the actual expressions of interest were open. And then, if you remember, for those that were around at that time, there was some things that were put together. So there were some proposals that came in, and then council went back and said, hey, how about you two working together on this? So I think there was a process there, getting through to the proposals and then to a final stage, which made sure that everyone was on board with that. Yeah.
I'm not going to speak to that particular issue because I was on that board. The next question I have is, with those, we obviously had a significant change in direction of how we funded organisations at the time. Those that lost their funding, have you gone back and, or has council gone back and had discussions with them as to how that impacted their future and what happened to them, and whether our community is richer or poorer for what occurred?
Kia ora. We've constantly been in contact with all the organisations that lost funding from the first time. We have struggled probably to connect with one in particular, but we have been constantly reaching out to them to find out information. We haven't asked those specific questions that you have brought up, and there's probably no reason why we can't do that. It might be quite good to find out from their perspective how they've been feeling about things, but we constantly do connect with those organisations.
Maybe I'll take that offline because I'm really not sure that I quite got the answer I was hoping for, but thank you.
I think the answer that you were hoping for is probably not there at the moment, reflected by Claire's comments that the specific questions that you were asking we haven't asked in that way of those organisations, but I'm happy to take that conversation offline, and as Claire has noted, that's a specific piece of work that we could do.
All right, I think we've got the video ready, so before it freezes again. And look, staff did say it's 20 minutes long. We're at 2:05. Do councillors want to watch the whole video? There has been an option there for them to put it on the LG Hub or somewhere else that we can access. So I don't want to minimise the effort that those have put in terms of creating the video by not showing it.
I think we should watch it, personally, councillors, because the alternative would have been that we would have had people reporting back, and because we've gone down this road, I think we need to continue going down it, or else we really are not doing a service or justice to this sector, and we need to hear their voices and hear what they have to say, because out of that might come questions to staff. Indeed. And this is our opportunity to ensure that this part of our community receives the gaze and attention that it deserves.
All right, well, look, I'm fine with that, and just working as a team, I thought we'd reach out and just ask. So we're going to watch the video. If you want to pop up and go to the loo, grab a coffee, just feel free to do so, and we'll just sit back and get the mood lighting going and enjoy the leaving.
We wanted to find out what was available, what the gaps were, and how we could look at social connections for older people, so it actually avoided people falling into the social isolation. Worked with Massey University and carried out a survey, and that survey highlighted that there was over 30% of older people who fell into the category of being isolated and lonely. But basically we wanted to have somewhere that older people could go to see what's on. So it was really exciting getting that information together and getting it up online. So that sort of evolved over the period of the project, and was one way that we could get information out. You know, looking at where do older people go. And so now we have over 70 businesses across from Otaki through to Paikokuripi. And their role really is to signpost if they see an older person comes in and, you know, might be chatting about, oh, I haven't seen anybody for ages, or I haven't seen a family, and they might say, oh, have you heard of Age Concern or Age Connect? So it's a way of signposting without it being onerous. So we ran tech help sessions where the young people were with the old people bringing their smartphones and tablets. Anyway, when we got the feedback sheets, the comments were, that was the most interesting session I have ever had about technology. And then we sat round and brainstormed, and we looked at the idea of how do you break down stereotypes? Let's do something more innovative. Let's do the human library and let's get it videoed. Let's get video things. So young, older people talking and being able to discuss things that really affect all of us. So it was normalising relationships. You can engage outside of the norm with groups like youth, like with other organisations. You don't have to sort of protect your patch. It's important that you don't, that you work together.
But we've come a long way in the last few years, and we're really getting some traction.
When the opportunity for funding over 3 years came along from the council, it was a godsend really for us, because a lot of the effort was going into one-off funding, and we didn't have the capacity to take a step back, think about our organisational needs, think about the way we were communicating with the community, think about our financial management, our structures, and how we could up the game there, whilst releasing our volunteers and the now trustees to really push some big projects along. And so that was absolutely key to us. So what we managed to do with the funding that came from the council was to get that core, and then we could go out and leverage other funding, because we had time to do it, for things like filming, for projects. And I think probably quite significantly, it released the trustees for time to do things like the solar farm. And that's been a quantum leap in terms of what we wanted to achieve. And the relationship with Ngāhapu, etc., we brought that in at that time. So that funding has, the before was we had great ideas, we were doing some great projects, it was small scale, but those core people that we could employ has allowed us to both improve the organisation and really go for it on some key projects.
It's easy for us to say small little projects, but we've given away hundreds of bikes. We've put curtains through hundreds of houses. and we've got the warm-up autarky project underway around home insulation and energy efficiency, heat pump funding.
And the fact that Kauri Coast District Council was prepared to fund us for 3 years was very attractive to other funders. That was big.
You always feel like it should be moving faster, but when you actually take a stop and sort of, even conversations like this, you sort of, wow, it is actually quite dynamic and expansive.
Challenge for Change is a mentoring program that is focused on our Kapiti young people, and it works for our Kapiti community. Just last weekend we just graduated 13 young people in that 9 to 13 age group, and they have been, for the last 12 months, have been in a mentoring relationship with a volunteer from our community. A significant part of Challenge for Change is its holistic viewpoint, that it looks at not just the young person but the whole of the whānau and the relationships that they have that support them. The program is so powerful in terms of what it can do in young people's lives and their whānau and the wider community that are engaged with those young people. This is Kapiti Impact Hub that you're in, and this is becoming a bit of a hub of community organisations. A lot of a hub of community organisations and groups. Council asked us to collaborate on a project in that priority, and this piece of work that we've been doing for the last 3 years is what resulted from that. But I would say 3 years, almost 4 years down the track now, we still have a working collaboration that has gone from strength to strength. So that's been a significant part of this project, actually, is working in the community to begin to firstly identify what was our sector and what it looked like, and then to be able to go, okay, so where could that go and where could we be if we worked together more?
And so the biggest thing first was to figure out, to understand our sector before we even started. So it was looking at what do we already know about our community and social sector in Kapiti, and how can we pull that together. And I think the initial kind of findings was not a lot had been created or pulled together in that way, specifically to look at our not-for-profit community sector. So we did a survey and in-depth focus groups as well, and then we pulled all of that together and produced a snapshot of not just facts and figures and demographics of our sector, but also dreams and aspirations and where we can go through from here. And that kind of formed the basis of our next planning and stages. So we shared the findings with our community, and we did some workshops on that, and then we got some sort of kind of concrete ideas of where we can move to from here. And then we looked at different work streams of how we could achieve those solutions for our sector. One of the most successful parts of the work streams that we did as far as workshops go is establishing a governance mentoring program.
One of the outcomes of this project is we are actually building our capability as a community in the area of governance. Another significant part of this project has been the whole concept of what we called as a work stream was iwi engagement. Very clearly for us when we first started out 3 years ago, iwi engagement across our sector was very low. It's been great to be able to build a working relationship with Te Atiawa ki whakarongatai, just the awareness of the need for more iwi engagement in this area, and then discussions about what that could look like in the future and how we as a sector can support iwi in their aspirations and what they want to see for their people, but also for this community. From my perspective, the shift that Council made towards this investment funding over a 3-year cycle, particularly in this priority, is massive for us as a community and social sector.
So our project, we were teamed together by the council to work collaboratively and provide service for the Kapiti area around reducing family violence, given our agency working in that space. We had some great ideas on how we could work or strengthen our relationship as a two agency, because we were already working together. But this contract gave us an opportunity to strengthen our relationship.
Yeah, so we kind of worked on in the first year of what we were going to do, and it was a trial year looking at how we would do things. And we sort of came to the end of that year, but then COVID struck, and really that made it really difficult for us, and what we had planned to do we then couldn't plan to do, and we actually had to put everything on hold, because for agencies like ours that year became an incredibly busy year. We found our referral rates increased significantly. As we came to the end of that year, we began to brainstorm and think about, well, what could we do and what did the next stage look like?
At that meeting, that's when we came up with the idea of employing someone to work in the space of both agencies. So that role was called Interagency Coordinator. We've actually gone ahead and interviewed for that position, and currently have employed someone in that role. She's currently doing a brilliant job. She only started in April this year, but has done some great work already in terms of finding out what both agencies do and working to look at where are the gaps and how can we strengthen that relationship even more.
And that's where it's really great to have this relationship with Refuge, and I think we've only enhanced that relationship through this collaboration.
KYS saw that there was a gap for programs for youth between 10, 11, 12, and so we put a proposal together to put He Kākano together, the program. We work with a group of young boys and year 6 to year 8, and we work one-to-one with them, and we also work with them in groups. We also have what we call our satellite mentees, so mentees at other schools that we work with, and we also work with 18 plus, and we work on a strength-based approach where we utilise the strength of the young people to help them overcome whatever challenges or issues they have. The program had to, it did evolve, and it became more complex as the needs became more complex. The needs of the young people became more complex. So, but the structure of the program remained the same because it works.
There were a whole heap of boys
they were labelled as being naughty boys and won't achieve, won't make it, and to turn up at their school prize giving for juniors and see these boys stand up and get these awards and then come out and say, Terry, man, dance to the Māori awards. That's such a cool thing, man.
From fighting to, creating positive relationships with other kids and, and going into the tuakana role and becoming a leader in school. And so that the principals are feeding this back on our celebration day, or celebration sessions. And the evolution of the program has got to the point where it's actually really working, but it's more impacting on a wider scope than just the young people.
Today, the Maori Lead Hub is a centre of creative excellence in Indigenous film and creative arts. Since 2020, we've undergone immense growth across all of the Maori Lead Hub activities. We exist for the community, and so we listen to our community and we grow with them. So across the last 3 years, whilst we've had to work around COVID lockdown and disruption, we've actually undertaken a really enormous period of growth here. And that's enabled us to activate our young people as community leaders. So right now we've got 12 young people aged between 16 and 24 who are delivering commercial work across New Zealand. We also activated our community garden, and what that did was bring the community together, and a lot of our retired community found it as a place of well-being for them during these really uncertain times. So all of a sudden we've got, jam making sessions, and then we've got canning sessions, and some of the old things that a lot of us who weren't brought up in that era have no knowledge of. And so the young people started coming, young mums, young dads, and started to sit alongside, work alongside the elderly in our community. And then from that, we grew the garden project even more, and we set up a kai collective, which was about taking the stigma off food to everybody, making it something that was, part of our basic human needs. So we've had a lot of conversations, we've hosted a lot of events, we've had people come and talk to our community, come up with ideas and solutions. That's part of a series of ongoing conversations that we have. Like I said, when our community says this is an issue, we make the Māori Land venue available. The other one is Toi Mataro. So we've grown the gallery, which sits at the front of the Māori Lead Hub, and we've put that online as well. So during COVID lockdown, the gallery went to an online space, and so the gallery has been a really important way to not only platform our local artists, but also to teach them, the skills that they need today to be able to run their own businesses. All of our activities are about manaaki in our community, so we will give, but that giving comes back to us with support, with us, people come and support activities in Māori.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko Barbara ahau, ko Ngāti Marataki Hapū, ko Rauko Tūmarai, ko Otaki Te Kāinga. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora mai tātou, ko Aoi Tuaki nei, ko Tararo te maunga, ko Tainui te waka, ko Otaki te awa, ko Ngāti Rauko te iwi, ko Ngāti Marataki me Ngāti Tiranga ngā Hapū, ko Aroha ahau. Kia ora.
The Connected Communities proposal that Otaki put through came out of a series of really beautiful conversations with people. Around Otaki, we wanted to grow our young leaders, so we really sought out people who were interested, who had a program that who really had the passion to lead and knew that it had really good outcomes for our children. So we actually led probably 2 of them from here. And again, as Roha has said, that we did that because this is a safe space. This is where they feel comfortable. And some of them that were engaged in that program actually hadn't been in here before. So it was a good opportunity to bring them into here, into this space, where they know it was a good opportunity to then link the history of this space with the history of our marae, because they are interconnected, and just to give them a sense of actually they're part of this. And we really got good results from some of our younger girls who hadn't ever been in Taringaroa or hadn't had a lot of experience at being at the marae, even though their family had been. So moving on for that, we had a great first year. We had some programs going in our second year. Then COVID came upon us, but even in that, we still performed our responsibilities and duties.
And one of those programs was a parenting program where we met for 10 weeks in and around kaupapa tukuiho. For the whānau that was sharing, it was good for them to know I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that have these problems. I'm not a bad mum. I'm not a bad dad. The Te Ake Te Tai program that we did as well for the rangatahi, that was a rangatahi-based program that we had here at Raukawa Marae, and so I think we had about 25 kids. So it was a good learning opportunity for the parents to learn alongside their kids.
And it was a continuation of whakapapa. Again, this hub was always a community hub, so it served a purpose again for gathering people in and allowing them to get together and learn. We will always be here. We will always be the kaitiaki for our environment, for our buildings, and for our own people.
And now we have intermission. No. And so back to staff. So we're just going to flick back to staff, having saw my ugly mug in one of those photos there, having been involved in a number of those activities. Look, I guess you don't really consider a way, I think it's probably what Lee said, until you sit back and look at it, the effect of the things that you support as councillors within the community. So that was pretty cool, just watching through that. I think well worth the 20 minutes or so to look at the impact that those groups are having within the community. I've seen it firsthand through some of those. The photo that you saw me there was handing out the awards through the fund created from the solar farm. And I'm sure some of you others around the table have been involved in other activities as well with some of these groups. So just back to staff.
Thank you. So hopefully, having watched that video, you've got a refreshed understanding of the programs that were funded via the last fund and of some of the benefits that they delivered. I think it's important to acknowledge that we have made a deliberate choice at this stage not to undertake a significant review of the social investment program. This goes somewhat towards some of the questions that Councillor McCann had around the overall impact and effectiveness of it. After 3 years, particularly where 2 of those 3 years were quite disrupted with COVID, it seemed too early to be undertaking a full review of that approach, but that is something that will happen within the next 2 years to inform thinking around the round subsequent to the one that we're currently going through at the moment. So it will be carried out in time for the long-term plan so that any considerations there, for example, whether or not funding is required or any other considerations that might come out of something like that can be reflected in the long-term plan. I guess at a staff level, we've been delighted to hear in those conversations that we have had, that you have seen on the video, is that there are representatives of organisations in the sector that have seen the benefit of the change that the social investment program attempted to make within the sector. There's been some beautiful stories shared around the personal impact on, for example, the young people in particular, if you think about the KYS example or some of the work that Ngā Hapu or Maori Land were doing. And, we are excited about what the next 3-year phase of the social investment program may deliver. I guess my sense, watching the early stages of that process play out, is that potentially there might be a slightly different focus to some of the contracts that are let this time round, in reflection of, I guess, the current challenges that our community is facing, the various impacts of the cost of living crisis and other bits and pieces are featured in some of the EOIs. The panel is working through that process, and you will have a paper coming very shortly, actually, to ask you to endorse their recommendations for that first stage of the process. So with that, I will stop warbling, and we are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Councillor McCann.
No questions. I just want to put my hand up to say I'd very much like to move
the recommendations.
Report,
Thank you.
As the portfolio holder.
All right. So no pressure, but late in the day, team, if you've got any questions, speak now. Otherwise, we'll move to the recommendations. I don't have any personally, other than just great work from all those involved. All right, I don't see any. So Councillor McCann's happy to move. We're looking for a seconder. Councillor Buswell. Right of introduction, Councillor McGinn. Sorry, just checking online. No questions.
I will make it relatively brief because I did suggest we all watch that. But I think it's really important because it is really hard to measure social impact because it is so different to business measures and monetary measures. But I think those videos clearly indicated the impact that we are by supporting community outreach in our community actually having. And you look around the table, everyone knows the impact that we have on our youth when we provide them with opportunities to belong, to feel confident. And then for those of us, Mr. Chair, who are approaching our senior years, the same goes when we make sure that they are involved in our community and watching our rangatahi work alongside our senior members to make sure that they can understand how all that technology works. Just fantastic. I really am appreciative that you took a different approach to this report and demonstrated through the community's own words and actions the effects it actually has. Because the written report sometimes just does not connect the way in which those videos were. So thank you for everyone for indulging us in watching them. I do hope you accept the report. And of course, it's really important that we thank all of those people in the communities who are actually doing this work. Those who are funded and those who are not funded, because we do know that communities don't stop just because we give them the money, but it makes a significant difference in areas where resources are so tight. So well done, team. I thought that was a really great video, great results. Thank you.
I'd just like to clarify, when Councillor McKenzie is approaching their future years, Mr. Chair, he was referring to himself to the Chair, not to the Chair. Councillor Halliday.
Whatever. Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, certainly echoing Rob's words as well. I'm very appreciative that we actually saw the video, and I think it was a very good representation to take on board exactly what's happened here. Also, look, just thanks for letting us know about the review process. You see what was shown on that video, and you can't fault where the money's gone and the results that have been achieved on what really is fairly low budgets, to be honest, with regards to things. And it's obviously made up by a lot of volunteer work and a lot of support in those spaces as well. The only thing I'd like to bring up is that we still have agencies out there that and I know when the concept of this fund was introduced, it was a little bit controversial for reasons. And I do think we need to have a conversation around how we can perhaps support those agencies that
have a long-term relationship in our communities, but again, also there by volunteers. And I look at organisations like ASK and Age Concern, Citizens Advice Bureau, and I think there needs to be a conversation how we can potentially support them, but it's not necessarily at the expense of this either. And it's trying to find that balance and how that works. So I do look forward to those conversations and how we can approach that as well. So no, thank you very much for that report, and I've been very interested to see what the future holds. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't see any further questions, and I did miss my own. Oh, sorry, it wasn't. I must have missed it. Deputy Mayor Holbrook.
Yeah, I know. Wishful thinking, maybe. So yeah, I agree with that. I think this is fantastic and a really great result. And it hasn't been perfect, but it was a very brand new thing that was being done, and a lot of work went into setting this up a few years ago, and some really great minds brought to the challenge of working out how this was going to roll on. Yeah, but I do agree. What we still see is just this basic need in our community, not for innovative things or new things or projects, which is great, and we do need to be funding those. And we heard from Lawrence that how fantastic that had been, but we still do need to find ways to support those organisations who are really struggling to support people in our community, and it's not a question, it's debate. And and I'm sure we'll talk about that more. But the other thing I noticed today was it's funny when you get two papers coming onto the agenda, you suddenly see a connection right at the beginning of the day. 6 hours ago, we might have to have a vote soon. We had the economic development team coming in and talking about intergenerational connectedness and what that means. So, and their work in that space. So I'm wondering how those two pieces of work are interconnecting and helping each other. That was another little thought that I had. But
Thank you.
Great work.
We're just going to pause here for a minute because with the lack of a quorum, can we move for the vote? Yeah.
Somebody online? Sophie's not.
She wasn't.
On. Jocelyn's not in the room. No. I'll go and see if I can find.
All right, team. So what we're going to do is just pause for a 5-minute break. We have been going for a while since lunch, so we're going to just take 5 minutes, and then hopefully by then Jocelyn's back. We've got a quorum, or I know because we can't actually put it to the vote until we have a quorum. So toilet stop, coffee, and then back in here again. Oh, Sophie's back. Quick, sit down, Rob. We're going to vote, Sophie. Don't go anywhere. All right, so we now have a quorum again. And so, Deputy Mayor, finished. Look, just before we did, I didn't have anything to say in debate. I missed a question. So I see Councillor will come back to you. There was the Ngā Hapu funding that wasn't used in year 3. I forgot what year we're in. Is that a year that has yet to come? Just the question was around whether that was just repurposed.
That was last financial year.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Councillor McCann, did you debate?
I just write a reply. Now that Sophie's back, I'm just turning to page 2 of my notes. I've got nothing further to add.
All right, thank you. And so we're going to put that to the vote. All those in favour, sorry, just so I don't rush too quickly through recommendations found on page 166A and B. Moved by Councillor McCann, seconded by, was it Councillor Buswell? No, what would we have on the, yep, it was. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye, against, and that is carried. Yes, we are nearing to having to intervene around meeting times and so forth. So what have we got up next? We've got the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. Riveting section here on numbers around housing and building from Hamish. No. Is Hamish joining us online? Oh, great. Hamish, welcome and jump straight into it. Just waiting for staff to unmute you or to...
Kia ora koutou. Good afternoon, councillors.
So today I'll just take the report on national policy statement on urban development monitoring reports as read, but just provide a little bit of context to the actual reports themselves. The reports that are attached to the paper you would have received cover the period from June last year through to February this year, and so that's quite a backward-looking time, and that's just to let you know the context is that the reports that we were focusing at the time on work around the growth strategy, so this is just updating that information, making it available to meet our requirements under the NPSUD. So I've already noticed this morning there's a bit of discussion around an economic development information, some of those impacts of lags and lags data, and this is certainly data that's kind of backward looking. So I appreciate that, and that might not give you some of the latest trends that we've been hearing about in the press. But just to let you know, we are actually looking at doing the next quarterly report, which is for the May to June period is underway at the moment, so we should have that to you quite soon. But notwithstanding, there are some key trends that might be of interest looking back over that last 6 to 9 months period from last year to earlier this year. Notwithstanding, we'll be well aware of some of the house price rises that were going on at one period in time with increasing demand. And the report shows that some of the numbers over those last 3 periods actually showed a bit of an easing or a slight plateauing of the relatively high numbers that we've been seeing over the last number of years. So I thought that was just an interesting point to note. As well as also there was a slight easing around some of the rate of increase around the Ministry of Social Housing Register as well alongside that. And I think the only last area I was also going to note that kind of builds on comments that Mr. Jefferson made earlier about some of the building activity going on is just noting that some of the information we capture over this period relating to potential net additional dwellings, which is we count how many additional dwellings come in as part of consents. Just noting that over the last year or 4 quarter periods, there's actually been a steady increase in more and more additional capacity coming through our consents information. Notwithstanding, there's lots of caveats around when and how those get built, particularly in the current environment, but that has been something steadily rising over the last few years. And as alluded to by James earlier, this is in front of further changes around the intensification and medium density residential standards coming into effect a bit later on this year. So the only other thing I was just going to note before opening for questions was just also to highlight that there were a number of a prior version was circulated as part of the agenda, and I think a more recent version was circulated for your information yesterday. And just to identify that that later version actually included a number of formatting updates, particularly to the tables and the headings of tables to help kind of clarify some of the quarters and the comparison information, but didn't actually impact any of the key consenting activity information or that information presented in the report itself. So otherwise, happy to take the report as read and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Hamish. Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Hamish. And look, you did right. A lot of this sort of things have almost been covered in the quarterly report and that sort of thing as well. But I just did have one question. You may or may not be able to help me out with this. It's on page 188 of the agenda, or 9 of, well, actually I think it's better to say 188. But there's a education buildings new foundations only information line, and it has $16 million in there. And I was just curious to know what that was for. Do we have a new school going in the area as such?
I would have to go and look at the data for that, but I can look that up and come back and confirm what that relates to for
Absolutely
you.
Fine.
I know there has been a period of activity where the Ministry of Education's been reinvesting in schools across the Motu, but particularly our district as well. So it could relate to some of that reinvestment work, but I'll come back and confirm for you.
No, thank you, Hamish. That's great. That's it for me. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Holborough.
Kia ora, thank you for this. Always good information. Some of it a little bit out of date, but I'm wondering if one of the tables is a bit more out of date than it should be. The table 1, the building consents issued by type, ends in February 2021, whereas the resource consents table on the next page ends at 2022. This is page 198, 199.
Yes, and thank you. That through you, Mr. Chair. That's one of the corrections I've made. So you'll see that in rolling forward our reports, we haven't subsequently initially updated some of those dates to those tables, but on the subsequent reports that were provided yesterday, that should have the correct dates in there. I think it identifies the 2021-2022 comparison. So that's some of those formatting errors that I alluded to before. So we'll be looking to have the corrected version that was circulated yesterday published on the website as the final product.
So apologies if I missed it. It's a bit late in the day. Yeah, obviously
No,
you have updated the information, which is more than some other parties have done.
Thank you, Hamish. I don't see any further questions. Appreciate your time on this, and there's a lot of information, and the councillors have obviously read through that, and just noting the updated information that Hamish has provided in advance as well, just correcting some of those tables and bringing things up to date. So nothing further from you, Hamish?
No, that's all. Thank you very much.
All right, team, we've got the recommendations found on page 177 of the report. Recommendation A. Got someone that's happy to move that? Councillor McCann, seconded by Councillor Halliday. Right of introduction, Councillor.
Waived.
That's
But thank you very much for all your work.
Waived, and just acknowledging your work there, Hamish, and pulling all this together. Open that up for debate. No. Any further discussions? Gone. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and that is carried. So we now move on to item number 9.1, which is the confirmation of minutes. There are two lots of minutes there from the 4th of November and the 12th of May. Is there anything within those minutes that anyone wants to raise as being incorrect? Give you a few seconds to... And then if not, could we look for someone to move and second the minutes? Okay, moved by Councillor Buswell, seconded by Councillor McCann. Any further discussion? Can't see anything online either. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and the minutes are carried. There's no public speaking for items not on the agenda, and I believe we now need to move into publicly excluded. So we'll just give staff a few minutes to do that. We just need a recommendation to go into publicly excluded. Yeah, yep, getting there. So, no, you're right. So we need to allow staff a few minutes to turn off the live stream, but before that, we'll just, someone wants to move that we go into public excluded. Councillor Buswell, seconded by Councillor Halliday. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and we'll now move into public exclusion, and the live stream will be stopped. So just a minute or so.